Welcome to Creating Smarter Spaces, where we explore the intersection of technology, innovation, and the built environment. Produced for corporate real estate, facilities management, and workplace technology executives, this podcast is your go-to resource to stay ahead in the ever-evolving world of smarter spaces. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the evolution of the employee badge. It's quite literally been a noose around the neck of people in the workplace for more than 30 years. But I think it's outlived its usefulness and it's holding up our evolution in the corporate workplace of today. So in this episode, I'm going to tell you why I believe now is the time to get rid of them for good and where we should be moving for the future. As always, I'm your host, Michael Przytula, and this is Creating Smarter Spaces. So let's dig in. The access card first replaced the office key, then got combined with the pin-on name badge, and now the employee badge is an integral part of the tools we need for work, for every employee everywhere, except maybe the smallest of organisations. For those that don't know, I grew up in a small city called Adelaide in Australia. And when I started working back there in the 90s, access badges weren't really a common thing. Not a lot of companies were big enough to invest in this type of technology, but starting out in the IT industry, there was one group of people I always saw with them on, and they were the service technicians from Digital Equipment Corporation, or DEC as it was known. You could always tell when these guys and girls that work for these large US corporations were in the computer rooms or the data centers that I was working around, because they had their badges on with the photos, their names, and the big brown digital block logo. Not only was this used for 24/7 access to the building to get much needed spare parts for their customers' mission critical computer systems, they would use this as a form of official company identification when visiting the offices of their customers to prove they were in fact from digital and they were there on official business, usually to fix some hardware that had or was just about to fail. I eventually made it to the IT big time back home, and I got a job at Digital and was rewarded with one of those badges carrying my name, my photo, and that nice big brown company logo. Now the badge back then was a beautiful coming together of a few different things. It replaced the pin-on name badge and it provided a much cheaper, dynamic, and granular way to grant access to a building than dealing with physical keys. It seemed like a great solution. But over time, some issues with the badge surfaced, which has seen it go through a few evolutions. Firstly, if someone lost their badge, like my first digital one, unlike a traditional key, it was pretty easy to know what this was likely going to gain you access to. It had the company logo emblazoned right there on the front, and there was usually a building in that city with the same logo shining brightly on top of it. While they were relatively cheap to replace, easy to disable, and much better than having a physical key lost or unaccounted for out there in the wild, it was very easy to identify what it could be used for from a malicious use perspective if it was lost. Because of this, we started to see the evolution of the badge to be more anonymous, with organizations over time removing the company details from it. While this increased security somewhat, it did so at the trade-off of this no longer being able to be used as a pseudo-official form of company identification, especially when it came to external parties. The next evolution I witnessed was the emphasis of the given name on the card. With its external value now gone, its application shifted more internally as one of more of a familiarity tool for when you would meet others from inside the company. In my case, the word Michael would be emphasized over the Przytula piece, but now just on a more anonymized white card with my photo. These are okay in concept. As someone who's terrible at remembering people's names when I first meet them, I find name tags really useful. However, there's always been two camps of people when it comes to wearing their badges, which makes this application a challenge. Firstly, there are those that wear their badge on the lanyard around their neck, and then those that use the little zip cord contraption that you slide onto your belt. These always feel a little 007-ish to me, as if I could double it as a hidden cord to choke any would-be assassins in the building. I must admit, I'm in the 007 camp, safety first, right? But I digress here. With these two most common of scenarios, two challenges exist. The first is that the badges are only printed on one side. And unless you're going to be like an airline with a uniform that has very specific mounting points for an ID card to be affixed and displayed facing outways, you've always only got a 50% charge that the badge is actually hanging the right way around. Murphy's Law probably suggests the odds are actually much higher that the name and the photo being hidden when anybody actually ever wants to reference it. But more on that later. The second being where people choose to wear them. Those who wore them with the lanyard now have their name dangling around their belly button. And those that have them on the zip cord have them way too low for anyone but a 4-year-old to actually read. With the company branding gone, and the likelihood of the photo and the name being turned around when you actually need to see it, other than being used to open doors, I question the applicability for the card's actual usability for identification to anyone. The exception being if requested to be presented to an internal security guard who actually knows what the anonymous card looks like to get you access to a new building, for example. This employee identification topic comes up when I talk to companies about the evolution to digital badges and the ability we have with badges now to evolve once more away from them to more biometric means. One of the first pieces of resistance I usually encounter is from someone in corporate security saying that if we take away the physical badge, how will we be able to identify our employees versus our visitors or even worse, malicious actors in the workplace? To them, I say this. Look, I get the concept, but let's play this out from the start. The card has evolved into being a generic white card with a photo and a name. Unless you're an airline or some other highly regulated environment, at least 50% of the time the person's badge is going to be facing the wrong direction to start with. If it is facing the right direction, odds are it's too low on the person for you to actually be able to read it or even match their photo up to the person wearing it as you pass in the corridor. And in some organizations, people have still got photos on their cards from 10, 15, and maybe even 25 years ago. So without hyper-close inspection in some cases, you can't even tell if the person in the photo is the person who's wearing it. Now, even if it was a current image and had the right info, tell me this. When was the last time you stopped someone that you didn't know in your workplace and asked them to inspect their badge? I say never. Even if you're the head of security, you're not walking down the corridor asking people to turn their badges around or lift them up for you to identify or verify them. And you're not asking them to pull them out if you can't see them, unless maybe you're having a bad day. Look, I'm sorry, but you just aren't. If you are in that camp in corporate security, I'm sorry. But the need for the badge to identify your people is all theory and no practice in 99.9% of companies out there today. I don't care what your policy says. People just don't and won't do it. It's not socially acceptable in virtually any workplace that isn't ultra paranoid about security. So, I say this argument is mute. Before we continue, I want to take a minute to thank all of you that have taken a few extra minutes to leave a review about the show. I'm really happy to see the content is resonating with so many of you. Podcasting is an interesting medium. As the host of a solo show, as they call this, it's easy to feel like you're sitting here in a padded room talking into a void, not really knowing if the message is hitting the mark or not. The star ratings and even better, the short written reviews help me know what you like and enable others to discover the show as well. So if you haven't had the chance to leave one yet, I'd love for you to do so. The simplest way is to visit the website at smarterspaces.live/reviews and hit the rate the show button. Or you can do it right here in the app you're using to listen to me right now. It really is that simple. Thanks a million, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Now, back to the episode. I mentioned a few months ago in a post about visitor management that I went into an office of a nuclear energy company, and they wrote my name and my company details on a sticker and then told me to wear it. My handwriting is pretty bad, and even though I had the sticker on, there was no way anyone was reading the dull blue pen on the white background in my chicken scratch handwriting. As I walked around that office, only 50% of the people had lanyards around their necks with badges on, and if I'd pulled that sticker off, I would have looked just like the other 50% of people in the office, and I guarantee you, no one would have stopped me. So if we don't use the badge for ID, it costs money to buy, creates waste, and can easily be lost, stolen, or forgotten at home. Why are so many companies against the move to a digital alternative? I'm still to be presented with a solid, valid reason. If you have one or know someone that does, please reach out. I'd really love to be educated on it because I've searched high and low and I haven't found one that doesn't assume everyday employees are roaming the halls, spot checking their fellow employees' badges. The digital alternatives we have today are virtually impossible to lose, and even if it is lost, it can't be used by someone else. And given how wedded we are to our phones and watches, it's far less likely to be left at home. It also doesn't have people having to make sure that they wear clothes with hooks or walk around with the noose around their neck all day, and it's ultimately more secure. There are a few great options on the market now to provide digital alternatives. Obviously, digital cards, keys, or whatever you choose to call them are one. Either embedded into a corporate mobile app or as part of your Apple or Android digital wallet. These have the added benefit of inheriting the security of the personal device. They also have the benefit of being able to be extended to a wearable such as an Apple Watch, which means employees don't even need to reach for their phone to get access through a door or a turnstile. They simply reach out their arm and bang, off they go. The other approach, which is even more controversial in some circles, is facial recognition, or more specifically, facial authentication. Despite the fact that they may appear to be the same thing, you look at a lens, it identifies you and lets you pass. They are in fact two very different things. I won't go into the intricacies of them here, but very simply, facial recognition matches an image of your face to a database, and facial authentication uses a mathematical hash of your face to match to a numerical code stored against your personal record in a database. If you want more details, you can go and check out the article I've just posted on the blog at smarterspaces.live/facial ID. The beauty of these approaches is that they don't even require you to carry anything. No one can steal them from you, and you can't leave your face at home. I've had the ability to experience a few of these solutions that provide facial authentication in the office environment, and I've used it extensively in my travels, and it's just great. Global Entry in the US is now using facial recognition. TSA PreCheck is now using facial recognition. British Immigration is using facial recognition. And United Boarding for international flights is also now using facial recognition. If it's good enough for what some might argue are these high-stakes identification tasks, then they should be good enough to get into your office. Look, I know some people have a thing about being identified and want to roam the planet being anonymous. But unless you're holed up in a homestead somewhere in the mountains and have never left your country, I'm sorry to tell you, but someone has your details already and they're using it. And if by chance you're one of these people, I'm 100% sure you aren't listening to this podcast, and they probably aren't working for your company either. In some countries, the US being one of them, many government services do provide people the liberty to opt out of methods like this and use traditional manual processes, at least domestically. But increasingly, these will become additional burdens for those people to have to go through, become more inconvenient for them, and I'd argue probably create more headache for them than they're really worth. I mean, hey, in the US, you can still pay for your groceries with a check if you want to, but be sure to keep bringing your pen, your ID card, and spend an extra 3 minutes at the checkout every time you buy a loaf of bread. For those of you outside the US, that last statement is no joke. It sounds ridiculous, I know, but it still happens more than you'd realize. My point here is this. We need to evolve when it comes to workplace security. I believe the majority of people will come along on the journey if they're getting something out of it, and the use of digital credentials such as facial authentication can only increase security. Can not only increase security, but streamline existing processes, reduce a ton of plastic waste, and enable us to create even more hyper-personalized experiences for employees in the workplace. I often call this the Facebook model. I'm prepared to give Facebook some information about myself to help them give me a better, more customized experience when I'm using their platform to keep connected with my family and friends. This isn't a give me your face so I can store it in our database and sell it to the Russians scenario. At least, I'd hope we have more trust in our employers than that. If you take the facial recognition or the authentication scenarios off the table for whatever reason you have, digital badges, I believe, are still a no-brainer. The only thing stopping most organizations moving here is this legacy concept that many in corporate security are hung up on, being that the physical badge is a form of visual corporate identification. Listen, I'm going to call bullshit on that. They are living in a utopian fantasy land. Don't believe me? Take off your badge and walk around your office. I guarantee no one will stop and ask you to see it. Facial authentication is something that companies and your security people might think your employees will push back on. I say this is because security people tend to be the ones who are also personally paranoid about things like giving their own data over to the machine, and maybe rightly so. And that's totally their prerogative. Ask them to come talk to you in a year and see if they're still lining up at the manual proof of identification line at the airport that's 45 minutes longer versus using the TSA pre-touchless identification that's being deployed now, and get through the whole process in less than 30 seconds. The vast majority of your employee population will embrace the opportunity to have a smoother, more convenient way to remove the literal noose that's around most of their necks, which is the badge on the lanyard. Digital badges and facial authentication specifically also opens the door to enabling so many other experiences for our people in the workplace. In 2020, together with some of my colleagues, we came up with a concept for a hyper-personalized digital signage platform for the office. It would make what looked like a standard corporate digital sign recognize you and come to life whenever an employee walked up to it. It would recognize the person using their digital badge from a phone, even in their pocket, and then hyper-personalize the display with relevant information like directions to their next meeting, lists of people that they collaborated with frequently that were also in the office. As they moved away, the display would return to its standard corporate messaging state. These are experiences we can unlock for people in the workplace using technologies like this. And I fully believe employees would opt in to participate in experiences like these that facial authentication and digital badges can unlock. So here today on this podcast, I'm calling for the demise of the physical badge. It's done us well for more than 30 years, but it's time to relegate it to the drawer with the checkbook. There's far more convenient, secure, cost-effective, and greener solutions on the market that also enable the next generation of employee experiences organizations are wishing for. Going digital will literally unlock a whole world of capabilities we simply can't offer today because of the noose we're carrying around our necks every time we go into the office, and for no good reason anymore. If you know a workplace or physical security expert who'd counter my position today, I would love to hear from them. Please forward them on this episode and have them get in touch with me. I'd love to hear their views. If you don't know where to find me, smarterspaces.live/connect. That's always the best place to connect with me on LinkedIn, and send me a DM, or even better, share this episode on your social feed. This episode was produced with support from iIdea. Don't know who they are yet because you're new to the show? Well, they could very well be the best kept secret in the world of room panels or meeting room displays. iIdea have been in the business for more than 20 years and make some of the best room display panels on the market. How do I know? I use them every day I go into the office. These displays don't only look great, they're some of the most secure and innovative displays on the market, with proven enterprise scale management tools and support for all the major space reservation platforms on the market. Whether you've still got your badge or you've gone digital, iIdea panels can natively support both physical and digital credentials. So you can just tap your phone or your badge on the panel and check straight into your room with your corporate credentials. If you're in the market for room panels, go check them out, iadea.com. IADEA.com. You won't be disappointed, and be sure to tell them that Michael sent you. So that's a wrap on today's episode. But before we leave today, just a reminder, I make this podcast for you. So if it's something you like and feel others would too, please consider leaving a review on your podcast platform of choice or share it with a colleague or friend. Not sure how to? Not a problem. Just point them to smarterspaces.live/listen and all the options will be available right there. As always, one final disclaimer, all views and opinions I share on this podcast are my own and may not necessarily be those of my employer. I trust you've enjoyed today's topic and I hope you'll tune in for another episode soon. This is where real estate, facilities management and technology converge. This is creating smarter spaces.